New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital, the most exclusive charity gala of the year, where Manhattan's elite flaunted their wealth in the name of philanthropy. Sarah Mitchell, 16 years old, paralyzed from the waist down, sat forgotten in her wheelchair, while 200 guests danced around her as if she were invisible. Then the unthinkable happened. Jake Thompson, the night janitor everyone ignored, crossed the entire ballroom in his blue maintenance uniform, knelt before the girl, and extended his hand, asking her to dance. As he spun her wheelchair, transforming it into a dance partner, neither knew that Victoria Mitchell, CEO of a $5 billion pharmaceutical empire, was watching from the grand staircase. The woman known for her ruthless business tactics was about to discover that the only man who had treated her daughter like a princess was the same insignificant janitor she had humiliated that morning. But the most devastating truth was yet to emerge. Jake wasn't just a janitor, he was Dr. Jacob Thompson, the neurosurgeon who 3 years earlier had operated on Sarah after the accident, saving her life, but not her legs. Mount Sinai Hospital gleamed like a jewel that November evening. The Hope Gala had transformed the main hall into a paradise of crystal chandeliers and white roses worth $30,000. The live orchestra played Mozart, while senators, tech moguls, and Wall Street titans displayed wealth that could feed entire countries. In a corner, strategically hidden behind a marble column, Sarah Mitchell observed everything from her $10,000 custom wheelchair. 16 years old, delicate beauty that even tragedy couldn't erase, green eyes that once sparkled on Broadway stages when she was the rising star of ballet. Now those same eyes were dim, drowned in 3 years of shattered dreams since a drunk driver had destroyed her spine and her future in 30 seconds of madness. Her mother, Victoria Mitchell, waltzed at the center of the floor with the Secretary of Health. The CEO of Pharmatech International managed a pharmaceutical empire with the same icy efficiency with which she managed her daughter's disability, as a public relations problem to minimize. Sarah had been brought to the gala not for inclusion, but for strategy. The disabled daughter's absence would generate more gossip than her silent, decorative presence. The sons of Manhattan's elite passed by Sarah as if she were furniture. Tyler Harrison, 18 and already heir to a real estate empire, had even mimicked wheelchair movements with his friends, laughing at his own wit, while Sarah pretended not to see, not to hear, not to exist. Jake Thompson was emptying trash bins in the adjacent corridor when the sound stopped him. Not the orchestra's music, but something more subtle and heartbreaking. The muffled sob of someone who had learned to cry in silence. 38 years old, widower, single father of 8-year-old Emma who had the same kind eyes, Jake knew that sound. It was the same one his daughter made when classmates didn't invite her to parties because "your dad cleans toilets." He peered discreetly and saw her, Sarah, alone among 200 people, invisible in her disability, while the world literally danced around her. The hospital's regulations were categorical. Service staff must not interact with guests during events. That very morning, Victoria Mitchell had berated him with cutting words for daring to use the main elevator, threatening immediate termination if he disturbed the people who matter again. But Jake saw in Sarah something that shattered every protocol. Not just loneliness or sadness. It was the resignation of someone who had accepted being invisible, of not deserving the joy everyone around her took for granted. He made a decision that would change 4 lives. He left the cleaning cart in the corridor, straightened his wrinkled blue uniform that smelled of bleach, and crossed the entire ballroom with determined steps. The chatter died progressively as 200 pairs of eyes followed the janitor, walking toward the girl in the wheelchair. The musicians slowed, uncertain whether to continue. The silence became deafening. Jake stopped before Sarah and did something no one in that room of privilege expected. He knelt. Not a formal bow, but a complete kneeling that brought him to the girl's eye level. With a clear voice that everyone could hear, he asked if she would grant him the honor of a dance. Sarah remained paralyzed by shock more than her condition. Tears began flowing as she looked at this man who saw her not as the CEO's disabled daughter, not as an embarrassment to hide, but as a girl who deserved to dance. She whispered that she couldn't, that she didn't know how, that it was impossible. Jake replied that everyone could dance, some with their feet, others with their hearts, and asked permission to show her how. When Sarah nodded, unable to speak through emotion, Jake rose and gently took the wheelchair handles. What happened next remained etched in the memory of all present. It wasn't an awkward or embarrassing movement of someone improvising. Jake transformed the wheelchair into an extension of Sarah's body, making her spin with grace and precision that seemed impossible. He tilted her at just the right moment, rotated her perfectly following the rhythm, created figures that transformed disability into a different but no less beautiful dance. The orchestra, initially confused, resumed playing with renewed vigor. Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21 filled the hall as Jake literally made Sarah fly. The girl laughed. For the first time in 3 years, she truly laughed, with her head thrown back and arms spread like wings. She was no longer the paralyzed girl in a wheelchair. She was a dancer who danced differently. Victoria Mitchell returned from her call with Tokyo as the music resumed. From the main staircase overlooking the ballroom, she saw a scene that paralyzed her more than any stock market crash. Her daughter was dancing, no, flying, guided by the janitor who that morning had dared to use her private elevator. Initial anger dissolved seeing Sarah's face, an expression of pure joy she hadn't seen in 3 years, since the accident. She observed with clinical attention how the janitor moved the wheelchair. These weren't random movements, but medical precision. The way he supported Sarah's neck during rotations, weight distribution, constant posture monitoring. Only someone with deep anatomical knowledge could move like this. Memory hit her violently. Dr. Jacob Thompson, the neurosurgeon who 3 years earlier had operated on Sarah for 18 hours after the accident. He had saved her, but hadn't restored her legs. Victoria, blinded by pain, had accused him of incompetence, threatened to destroy his career. 2 weeks later, he had vanished. When the music ended, Sarah held the janitor, asking his name. Jake Thompson, he replied before disappearing. The name paralyzed her. It couldn't be the same man. That night, Victoria hacked the hospital system. The photo in the night janitor's file confirmed her suspicions. It was Dr. Thompson, hired 18 months earlier with modest references and minimum wage. Research revealed a devastating story. After Sarah, he had operated on another child who died on the table. Cleared by investigations but destroyed by guilt, he had lost everything. Career, wife, custody of daughter Emma. He had disappeared for a year, then reappeared as a janitor in the same hospital where he once operated, with an agreement to never reveal his identity. But there was more. Every month, he donated half his salary to the foundation treating Sarah, anonymously paying for the most expensive therapies. For 3 years, he had secretly funded the care of the patient he couldn't completely heal. The next day, she confronted him leaving his night shift. They looked at each other in silence. The billionaire CEO and the janitor, united by shared tragedy. They spoke with painful honesty about the past, failure, guilt. Jake confessed to thinking every night about the surgery. Victoria admitted using him as a scapegoat for her pain. Emma, Jake's daughter, inadvertently precipitated events. Victoria met her a week later in the hospital lobby. 8 years old, blonde pigtails, same gentle smile as her father, waiting on a bench doing homework. Her mother worked late, and Jake picked her up when he could. The child proudly told how her father had been an important doctor who saved children, but then became sad because he couldn't save everyone. She spoke of a girl who couldn't walk anymore, and a boy who went to heaven, how Dad said even superheroes sometimes fail, but the important thing is to try. Victoria felt her heart break, listening to this child trying to make sense of her father's fall. When Jake appeared to pick up Emma, he found Victoria in tears hugging his daughter. The moment of recognition was loaded with unspoken emotions. Emma, with children's innocence, asked if she could meet the princess who couldn't walk that Dad always talked about. Victoria impulsively invited them home. Sarah needed friends, she said, and Emma seemed perfect. The friendship between the two girls blossomed immediately. Emma didn't see the wheelchair as a limitation, but as a super cool throne with wheels. Sarah, used to pity or embarrassment from peers, found in Emma a friend who saw her simply as Sarah, not as the disabled one. During these visits, Jake inadvertently began doing physical therapy with Sarah. He disguised exercises as games with Emma, transformed rehabilitation into fun.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Sarah made progress that professional therapists hadn't achieved in years. Muscles that still functioned strengthened. Her posture improved. Even sensitivity showed signs of partial recovery. Victoria watched everything through her internal security cameras, seeing Jake apply techniques she recognized from his published medical studies years earlier. It wasn't standard physical therapy, but advanced neurorehabilitation disguised as play. The surgeon in him couldn't stop looking for ways to help Sarah, even if officially he was just her daughter's friend's father. One afternoon, while the girls watched a movie, Victoria confronted Jake on the terrace. The Manhattan sunset view provided backdrop to a conversation both knew was inevitable. Victoria offered him to direct a new spinal injury research center Pharmatech was opening, not as an operating surgeon but as scientific director, guiding research that could help thousands of children like Sarah. Jake initially refused. His hands, he said looking at them, were hands that had failed. They didn't deserve to return to medicine. But Victoria insisted it wasn't his hands needed now, but his mind, his experience, his unique understanding of both the science and humanity of disability. Sarah convinced him definitively. She had secretly listened and burst onto the terrace from her wheelchair. With teenage frankness, she told Jake that hiding wouldn't bring back the dead child or her legs, but helping others could give meaning to both tragedies. She asked if he preferred cleaning bathrooms to punish himself or laboratories to redeem himself. Jake's transformation from janitor to director of the Thompson Center for Spinal Injury Research was deliberately kept private. No media announcements, no fanfare. Jake insisted on maintaining a low profile, focusing on work, not public redemption. But results spoke for themselves. In 6 months, the center had developed revolutionary protocols combining neurosurgery, bioengineering, and cell therapies. They didn't promise miracles. Jake was brutally honest about this, but offered real, tangible improvements that restored autonomy and dignity. Sarah became the center's first official patient, undergoing experimental treatment with epidural electrical stimulation and gene therapy. She began recovering partial sensation in her legs. It wasn't a miracle. She wouldn't run marathons, but she could feel warmth, pressure, even slight pain that paradoxically filled her with joy because it meant the nerves weren't completely dead. Simultaneously, Sarah had found her calling. She began teaching inclusive dance to other disabled teenagers, showing them, as Jake had shown her, that you could dance with your heart when your feet wouldn't cooperate. Her wheelchair dance school attracted media attention, transforming her into a symbol of resilience and creativity. Emma became the center's unofficial mascot, spending afternoons after school helping young patients. Her sunny presence brought lightness to an environment that could be overwhelming. Jake and Laura, seeing the positive influence of the environment on Emma, had found balance in co-parenting that, while not romantic, was functional and respectful. Victoria underwent the deepest transformation. The ruthless CEO discovered empathy, not as weakness, but as strength. She began using her power and influence not just for profit, but for progress. Pharmatech became a leader in accessibility, hiring disabled people in meaningful roles, not for tokenism, but for the unique value of their perspectives. A year after opening, the center had already helped 200 children with varying degrees of success. Some recovered partial mobility, others improved quality of life, all found hope and dignity. Jake had published 3 revolutionary papers that were redefining the approach to pediatric spinal injuries worldwide. But the most significant moment came during the second annual gala. Sarah asked to speak, and what she said became part of the center's history. She told how a janitor had made her dance when she thought she didn't even deserve to exist in the same room with normal people. She spoke of how that dance had started a chain of events that had transformed 4 broken lives into an unconventional but deeply united family. She publicly revealed that Jake was the surgeon who had operated on her, who had punished himself for 3 years for not saving her legs, who had secretly paid for her care while cleaning bathrooms. The room remained in absolute silence as Sarah continued, explaining that true disability wasn't physical, but spiritual, and that Jake had taught her you could dance even while sitting if you had someone who believed in you. The center's third gala was different. No longer a charity event where the rich paid to feel good, but a genuine celebration of diversity and resilience. Half the guests were in wheelchairs, on crutches, or with other disabilities. The dance floor had been redesigned to be completely accessible. Sarah, now 19 and a pre-med student inspired by Jake, had organized a special performance. 10 of her inclusive dance school students would perform choreography she had created. But the highlight would be something else. Thanks to a robotic exoskeleton developed by the center in collaboration with MIT, Sarah could stand and take small assisted steps. It wasn't walking in the traditional sense, but it was voluntary leg movement for the first time in 6 years. Jake had personally supervised every aspect of the device, applying his neurosurgical knowledge to optimize the nerve-machine interface. When the orchestra began playing Bach's air on the G string, different music from that first dance 3 years earlier, but equally meaningful, Sarah rose from her wheelchair. The audience held their breath as she, supported by the exoskeleton but guided by her will, took 5 steps toward the center of the floor. Jake approached and, as 3 years before, bowed, asking her to dance. But this time Sarah was standing, trembling but upright, as he supported her in a slow but real dance. It wasn't the acrobatic ballet of her Broadway past, but it was real, voluntary, hers. Emma joined them, then Victoria, then one by one all present, able and disabled together, in a collective dance celebrating not perfection, but the beauty of human resilience. Photographers captured the moment. The redeemed surgeon, the reborn dancer, the humanized CEO, and the child who had united everyone with her innocence. A journalist asked Jake how it felt to go from janitor to savior. Jake gently corrected. He had never stopped being a janitor. He had been custodian of hope when cleaning floors, thinking about how to help Sarah. He was custodian of dignity when treating every patient as a complete human being. He was custodian of humility, still wearing the janitor's pin on his white coat, remembering that a person's value isn't in their title, but in their service. Sarah took the microphone for the evening's final announcement. The center had developed a protocol showing promising results in partial recovery, even in injuries considered complete. It wasn't a miracle cure, she emphasized, looking at Jake, who nodded, approving her honesty. But it offered hope, where before there was only resignation. As the evening ended, Jake found himself on the same terrace where Victoria had offered him the center's directorship. This time he was accompanied by Sarah, who walked slowly with the exoskeleton's assistance, but walked. She told him she had decided to specialize in pediatric neurosurgery, to follow in his footsteps, but in her own way. Jake cried hearing these words. They were different tears from the guilt he had shed for years. They were tears of gratitude for the winding path that had taken him from the operating table to the mop bucket, and then back to medicine, but with a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to heal. The last image of that evening, which became iconic in American medical history, showed 4 figures silhouetted against New York's lights. Jake in his white coat with the janitor's pin, Sarah standing in her LED-decorated exoskeleton that made her look like she'd stepped out of a sci-fi movie, Emma laughing, holding both their hands, and Victoria, who for the first time in her adult life smiled without calculation, just with genuine joy. The Mitchell-Thompson Center would become a world model, saving or improving thousands of lives. But it all started with a janitor who had dared to cross a ballroom to invite a forgotten princess to dance. A spontaneous act of kindness that had triggered a chain reaction of redemption, forgiveness, and rebirth. True healing, Jake had learned, didn't always mean returning exactly as before. Sometimes it meant becoming something new, different, but no less precious. Sarah would never return to Broadway as prima ballerina, but she had created a new art form that inspired thousands. Jake would never again be the superstar surgeon of old, but he had become something more, a healer of souls as well as bodies. And ultimately, Victoria had understood a mother's love wasn't measured in protecting her daughter from the world, but in giving her the tools to dance in it, even if on wheels, even with robotic aids, even differently than she had dreamed. The janitor had taught them all that titles are just labels, that dignity isn't lost with disability, that failure can be the beginning of redemption, and that sometimes you need to kneel before someone not in submission, but to lift them to the level they deserve. Jake continued wearing the janitor's pin for the rest of his career, a professional memento mori reminding him he had found salvation not in neurosurgery's glory, but in the humility of those who clean, organize, and safeguard human dignity in all its forms. Hit like if you believe everyone deserves to dance, regardless of their limitations. Comment with the passage that moved you most. Share with someone who needs to know that true disability is in the soul of those who stop seeing beauty in diversity. Subscribe for more stories showing how a single act of kindness can change destinies.